Today we're going to be taking a look at two of the biggest names in the industry, Bluehost and Hostgator.
Yes. Two very popular options that a lot of people, kind of start with. And for good reason, they both have a lot of things going for them.
Yeah, and they're both actually very good, and
Mm.
they're both very similar in a lot of ways, but there's some key differences that we're going to be diving into today to help you decide which one might be the better fit for you.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one of the first things that we should talk about is who these companies are kind of targeting, because that's going to influence, kind of which one might be better for your particular needs.
For sure.
So I think with Bluehost, one of the things that they're known for is being very beginner friendly.
Absolutely.
They have really, really simple setup if you're using WordPress,
Right.
which most websites are these days.
Yeah, definitely the majority. Yeah.
So it's, they've got like a one-click install for WordPress.
Yeah.
Their dashboard is very user-friendly. So if you're somebody who is just starting out and, maybe you're not super comfortable with all the technical stuff,
Right.
Bluehost is really great for kind of holding your hand and walking you through the process.
It's like they've anticipated all the questions and all the struggles that a beginner would have
Right.
and kind of like preemptively like smoothed it all out for you.
Yeah, and they've got really great tutorials and, visual guides and things like that. So
Yeah.
if you do get stuck, there is help available.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, HostGator is also a good option for beginners, but I think they kind of appeal to a slightly different audience. They are a little bit more kind of techy. I don't want to say like they're only for techie people,
Right.
but they, they don't necessarily have that same level of hand-holding.
Yeah, I would agree.
So, if you're somebody who maybe is a little bit more comfortable with, like working with cPanel and things like that, or you're willing to kind of dig in and figure things out on your own,
Right.
then HostGator could be a good option.
Yeah, because they do give you a little bit more control over your environment,
Yeah.
whereas Bluehost kind of tries to like streamline everything and make it as simple as possible.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So yeah, right off the bat, I think that's an important distinction is kind of, who are these companies, kind of targeting?
Yeah, that's a good kind of like litmus test right at the beginning to
Yeah.
see like, okay, which one of these two am I kind of more leaning towards based on my own kind of technical abilities and my willingness to kind of dig in and learn.
Exactly.
So let's move on to something that is absolutely crucial for any website, and that is performance.
Oh,
We all know how frustrating it is to go to a website and have it takes forever to load.
yeah.
You're probably going to click away if it takes more than a couple of seconds. And Google actually penalizes websites that load slowly.
That's right.
So it's not just about user experience, it's also about your search engine rankings.
Yeah, your SEO. So, you want a site that's going to load quickly.
Yeah, and so Bluehost and HostGator both make big promises about their performance. HostGator actually guarantees a 99.99% uptime, which is very impressive.
Yeah, that sounds good on paper.
And they even offer compensation if they fall short of that promise.
Oh, wow.
But what's interesting is that when you look at the data, Bluehost actually consistently outperforms HostGator in terms of uptime.
Interesting.
So it's like the tortoise and the hare. HostGator might have these like bursts of speed,
Right.
but Bluehost is kind of the slow and steady one that wins the race in the end.
Okay, I like that analogy.
Yeah, because it's about that consistency. You want a website that is reliably up and running all the time.
All right, especially if you're running a business or, we're trying to get your message out there. You can't afford to have your website down.
Yeah, and another thing to consider is how well a hosting provider can handle traffic spikes.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
So, let's say your website goes viral or you launch a big marketing campaign.
Right. Yeah.
You suddenly have a ton of people coming to your website.
You're going to need a host that can handle that.
Exactly.
That's a good point.
And Bluehost actually has a really good track record for handling those kinds of traffic spikes.
Okay.
They have robust infrastructure.
Yeah.
And they have a really smart way of allocating resources so that even if you have this huge influx of visitors, your website is still going to load quickly.
So it's kind of like they've anticipated,
Yeah.
that might happen, and they've kind of built their system in a way that can accommodate it.
Right. They've built it to be scalable,
Hmm.
which is something that we're going to talk about more in just a minute.
Okay, great.
But yeah, that's a really important consideration because you don't want to be in a situation where your website's finally getting the attention that you want,
Right.
but then it crashes because your hosting provider can't handle it.
Nobody wants that. That's a good point to keep in mind.
All right, so let's talk about scalability
Okay.
because Choosing a hosting provider is not just about your needs today, it's also about thinking about your needs in the future. Right, because hopefully your website's going to grow. You're going to get more traffic. You're going to need more resources.
That's right, yeah. And you don't want to get stuck with a hosting provider that can't grow with you.
Right.
Because then you're going to have to migrate your website to a new host, and that can be a real pain.
Yeah, it can be very disruptive, and it can actually cause downtime for your website. So when it comes to scalability, Bluehost actually has a real advantage here.
Okay.
They make it very easy to upgrade your hosting plan as your needs change. So you can start with a shared hosting plan, which is the most affordable option.
Right.
But then as your website grows, you can seamlessly transition to a VPS or even a dedicated server.
Okay, cool.
And they have a really good track record for making those transitions smooth and painless.
That's good to know.
Yeah. And another thing that I like about Bluehost in terms of scalability is that they include dedicated IPs in their higher tier plans.
Okay, so can you explain what a dedicated IP is and why that matters?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So a dedicated IP address is basically like your website's home address on the internet. So if you have a shared hosting plan, you're sharing that IP address with other websites. But if you have a dedicated IP address, it's just for your website.
Oh, okay.
And that can actually have a couple of benefits for your performance and your security.
Oh, okay. How so?
So in terms of performance, if you have a dedicated IP address, it can actually speed up your website's loading time.
Oh, wow.
Because the server doesn't have to figure out which website to send the request to. It's like if you were sending a letter and you put the person's name and address on it, but you didn't put their apartment number. The post office might still be able to deliver it, but it's going to take a little bit longer because they have to figure out which apartment it goes to.
Oh, okay, I get it.
And then in terms of security, a dedicated IP address can actually make your website more secure. Because if you're sharing an IP address with other websites and one of those websites gets hacked, it could potentially affect your website as well.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So having a dedicated IP address kind of isolates your website from those kinds of risks.
So it's kind of like having your own little private, space.
Yeah, exactly. It's like your own little fortress on the internet.
Okay. That's great to know, especially if you're running an e-commerce site or something like that where you're dealing with sensitive customer data.
Right, exactly.
So that's a big plus for Bluehost.
Yeah, and Hostgator does offer dedicated IP addresses, but they charge extra for them. Yeah, so if you think you're going to need a dedicated IP address down the road, Bluehost might be the better option because they include it in their plans.
Okay. That makes sense.
All right, so let's talk about pricing.
Yeah, the fun stuff.
Yeah, so both Bluehost and Hostgators are known for being very affordable, especially for their shared hosting plans. They have some really great introductory offers.
Yes. Those can be very tempting.
Yeah, but it's important to look beyond those introductory offers.
Right.
And see what the renewal prices are going to be.
Right, because those can sometimes go up.
Yeah, exactly. So you want to make sure that you're comfortable with the long-term cost of hosting with a particular provider.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And when it comes to pricing, Hostgator is actually a little bit more transparent than Bluehost. They're very upfront about their renewal prices, and their renewal prices are generally a little bit lower than Bluehost's.
Okay.
So if you're on a tight budget, Hostgator might be the better option. They also have a longer money-back guarantee.
Oh, okay.
They give you 45 days to try out their hosting,
Wow.
whereas Bluehost only gives you 30 days.
Okay, so that's another thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, it just gives you a little bit more time to kind of play around with the platform and see if you like it. All right, so let's move on to another important consideration, which is security.
Yes, security is super important.
Yeah, you don't want your website to get hacked. And both Bluehost and Hostgator take security very seriously.
Yeah, that's good to hear.
Yeah, they both offer free SSL certificates.
Okay, and just to clarify for our listeners, SSL certificates encrypt the data that's being transmitted between your website and your visitors.
Right.
So it's basically like putting a lock on that information so that nobody can intercept it.
Exactly. So it's essential for any website, especially if you're collecting any kind of sensitive information like credit card numbers or personal data. But Bluehost actually goes a step further than Hostgator when it comes to security.
Okay.
They have a feature called account isolation, which basically means that your website is isolated from other websites on the same server.
Okay.
So if one of those other websites gets hacked, it's not going to affect your website. So it's kind of like having your own little apartment in a big apartment building. If your neighbor's apartment gets robbed, it's not going to affect your apartment.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah, so it's just an extra layer of protection that Bluehost offers.
And does HostGator offer that?
They do not.
Yeah, okay, so that's a big difference.
Yeah, and Bluehost also has some other security features that HostGator doesn't offer. They have a really good system for blocking malware And they also have a team of security experts who are constantly monitoring their servers for any suspicious activity.
So it's kind of like they've got your back.
Right. They're very proactive about security.
That's good to know.
Yeah, so if security is a top priority for you, Bluehost is definitely the better option.
Okay, that makes sense.
All right, so last but not least, let's talk about customer support.
Okay, because sometimes you need a little help.
Yeah, even with the most user-friendly platforms, there are times when you're going to run into problems or you're going to have questions. And both Bluehost and Hostgator offer customer support.
That's good.
Yeah, they have phone support, chat support, and email support. But there's a noticeable difference in the quality of their customer support.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Bluehost consistently gets higher ratings for their customer support than HostGator. Their support agents are very knowledgeable, they're very friendly, and they're very helpful.
That's what you want.
Yeah, and they're also very responsive, so you don't have to wait hours or even days to get a response.
That sounds like if you need help, Bluehost is going to be there for you.
Right. They're really good at supporting their customers.
Okay, that's a good thing to know.
Yeah, so those are the main differences between Bluehost and HostGator.
All right, so now that we've kind of gone through all of that, who do you think is the winner?
That is a great question, and the answer is that it really depends on your individual needs and priorities.
Okay.
There's no one-size-fits-all answer. So if I had to kind of sum it up, I would say the Bluehost is the better option for beginners.
Okay.
They're very user-friendly. They have excellent customer support, and they're very secure.
Okay.
HostGator is a good option if you're on a tight budget or if you need a little bit more control over your hosting environment. But they're not quite as user-friendly as Bluehost, and their customer support isn't as good.
So it really comes down to kind of what your priorities are.
Yeah, exactly. What are your must-haves and what are your nice-to-haves?
Right.
And I think the best way to decide is to just try them both out. They both offer money-back guarantees, so you can sign up for a plan, play around with the platform, and see which one you like better. So if you're interested in trying out either of these hosting providers, just click on the links in the description below.
Yeah, and you can get started today.
All right, so that's it for this week's Deep Dive.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.